PvP has always been a huge source of controversy for Minecraft. For nearly a decade, the PvP community has been divided, with many players dissatisfied with the changes that Mojang has made to combat. Above everything else, the issue that has divided the community the most is lag. Lag has always been a common annoyance in every online game. However, in Minecraft, some of the strange behaviors of lag are detrimental to competitive PvP. Because of this, players from different regions have never been able to compete fairly with each other. But what if that wasn't the case? What if there was a way for everyone to play at a level playing field regardless of their latency? Well, the brand new plugin Knockback Sync might bring us a huge step closer to that reality, and it might be the biggest change to Minecraft PvP since the 1.9 combat update. To understand why this plugin is such a big deal, we first need to understand how Minecraft handles knockback. Knockback is the distance that a player travels after they take damage from an attack. It might not be something that you think about all that much, but knockback is something that's present in almost every combat situation in Minecraft, whether it be when hoarding off a group of mobs or fighting an intense PvP battle. In Minecraft, there's two different ways a player can take knockback. If a player is on the ground or they're rising from the air from a jump when they get attacked, they will take knockback up into the air. However, as soon as a player starts falling from the air when they get attacked, they take knockback downwards into the ground. To keep things simple, I'm gonna call these two types of knockback rising knockback and falling knockback. The most important thing to note is that the amount of distance that you travel from taking falling knockback is significantly less than with rising knockback. Because of this, it's much more ideal to take falling knockback instead of rising knockback in most combat situations, since it makes it a lot harder for your opponent to get a double hit or start a combo on you when you're taking falling knockback. This mechanic itself is part of the reason why melee-based combat has such a high skill ceiling, since it makes timing your attacks and your jumps much more important if you're trying to win a fight. In single player, Minecraft's knockback works flawlessly. However, in multiplayer, there's an extremely big problem. The problem is, Minecraft doesn't factor in network latency when determining what a player's position is on the server. This causes the server to use outdated information when determining the position of higher latency players. As a result, players with higher latency tend to take falling knockback in many situations where they technically shouldn't be. To demonstrate this, I ran an experiment with one of my friends. In this experiment, I made a macro that instantly left clicks for me as soon as the attack cooldown on my sword ends for 4 consecutive attacks, ensuring that the timing between all of my attacks is the exact same in between each test. For the first test, my friend here has pretty low latency to the server, with only about 40 milliseconds of latency. As you can see, when I use the macro on him, he takes about 14.5 blocks of knockback in total, taking rising knockback with each attack, just as how a mob would in single player. For the second test, we're running the exact same setup. However, this time, my friend is connected to a VPN, increasing his latency to about 150 ms. And as you can see, the results are completely different. Instead of taking 14.5 blocks of knockback like before, he now takes 10 blocks of knockback, alternating between taking rising and falling knockback with each attack. After he takes rising knockback once, by the time I can attack him again, the server thinks that he's still falling in the air, even though on his screen, he's already landed on the ground. This results in him taking falling knockback every other attack without having to jump or do anything at all. It goes without saying that this is a big problem. Unlike low ping players, it is impossible to hold a high ping player in a combo because of their knockback reduction. When it comes to void-based game modes like Bed Wars, Sky Wars, or Sumo for example, these game modes are simply not viable on versions past 1.8 since it takes twice as much effort to hit a high ping player into the void. Now, many competitive PvPers have learned to adjust their playstyle to counter the knockback reduction that high ping players have, usually by playing much more cautiously and spamming crits. However, if you aren't fighting tier list sweats, high ping puts melee-based combat into easy mode, and you don't need to have crazy high latency to start taking less knockback either. Having as little as 90 milliseconds of latency, which is the ping that I get to most North American servers, is enough for me to start taking falling knockback every other hit without doing anything. So how do you even fix this issue without completely changing how knockback works? One thing that a few servers have tried doing is disabling knockback scaling. I actually covered this in a lot of detail in a previous video, but what this essentially does is remove falling knockback from the game entirely. This makes it so that players take rising knockback with every single attack, regardless if they're falling in the air or not. This is actually the knockback that most 1.8 PvP servers use to ensure that every player takes consistent knockback, regardless of their latency. While the solution does work well on 1.8 servers, in more recent versions of Minecraft, the lack of falling knockback knockback creates new problems. Without falling knockback, you can pretty effortlessly send any player flying away if they try to crit you or jump at you. This makes going for crits and jumping in fights much more punishing compared to vanilla knockback, ultimately making this solution undesirable. Funny enough though, it was actually Mindman Club, a popular 1.8 PvP server that finally found a solution to this problem. Like I said before, the main problem is that the server uses outdated information when determining whether higher latency players are falling in the air or not, which causes higher latency players to take falling knockback when on their screen, they're already on the ground. So if you think about it, this problem wouldn't exist if the server was able to tell what a player's client-sided position is. This is essentially what Mindman Club's plugin does. Mindman Club's plugin syncs a player's position data by using their latency, allowing the server to accurately predict when a player is falling in the air on their client regardless of their latency. This makes every player on the server take the same knockback that a low ping player would take on a vanilla server, without modifying Minecraft's knockback at all. The algorithm that Mindman Club uses to achieve this actually isn't all that different from lag compensation or rollback netcode, which are algorithms that are used to fix latency-related issues by many esport titles, such as CS2, Valorant, Warzone, and Mortal Kombat, for example. These algorithms synchronize game states using the player's network latency, ensuring that position packets sent by higher latency players don't cause any weird issues to occur, like random shots not registering, for example. Unfortunately though, Mindman Club's 1.20 server isn't released yet, and you aren't able to try it out unless you have a rank on the server. But not to worry, because Caseload, a former high tier 1 Diamond Pot player, created his own version of this plugin that pretty much does the exact same thing. This plugin, which he calls Knockback Sync, is completely free and open source for any server to use. I've tried both plugins and they both feel identical to me, so if you aren't able to try Mindman Club, you can get the same experience by hosting your own server and applying the Knockback Sync plugin to it, which will be in the description down below. Definitely support Mindman Club if you can though, since they're the main reason why Knockback Sync exists in the first place, and I highly recommend checking out their 1.20 server when it comes out. So how does Knockback Sync actually feel in practice? For starters, both rising knockback and falling knockback function exactly the same as how they would in vanilla. This shouldn't be surprising though, since Knockback Sync doesn't change any of the properties of vanilla knockback. What is surprising though is the fact that you can finally hold high ping players in a combo now. Doing the same experiment as before, you can see that high ping players now take the exact same knockback that a low ping player would take on a vanilla server. Now, I know that this alone isn't enough to convince longtime PvPers that Knockback Sync doesn't alter vanilla knockback, so I decided to conduct another experiment. In this experiment, I used a macro to record a random string of 8 attacks that all have different timing to them, and I also included some jumps and crits into the attack chain as well to make it more realistic. For the first test, I used this macro on a vanilla server against my friend while he was on low ping and on high ping. As you'd expect, his knockback was completely different on high ping. On low ping, he took about 25 blocks of knockback, while on high ping, he took only about 20 blocks of knockback. Running the same test on a server with Knockback Sync, however, you can see that my friend gets knockback 25 blocks away regardless if he's on low ping or high ping. Not only is his knockback consistent across different ping ranges, but this is also 100% consistent with the knockback that he would take on a vanilla server while having low ping. While this sounds and looks really good, surely there has to be a catch, right? Well, originally Knockback Sync treated every player as if they had 0 milliseconds of latency, so every player would essentially take the same knockback that a mob would take in single player. Because of this, you can sprint hit another player as fast as you want, and pretty much guarantee that they take rising knockback from all of your attacks, assuming that they aren't falling from a jump when you hit them. Now, this isn't anything exclusive to Knockback Sync, since the exact same thing happens when you fight a player with absurdly low ping on a vanilla server. But with that being said, most players you fight against usually have at least a little bit of latency that prevents you from dealing rising knockback with every attack if you hit them too fast. This would make Knockback Sync feel a little bit unrealistic in some situations. Because of this, Knockback Sync now has a latency offset feature. If the offset value is set to 50, for example, this makes every player that has above 50 milliseconds of latency take the same knockback that a 50 ms player would take on a vanilla server. This feature only applies to players that have higher ping than the offset value, so if the offset value is 50, players that have below 50 ms will take the exact same knockback that they would on any other vanilla server. By default, the offset value is set to 20, but this is configurable inside of the plugin itself. From my testing, I found that a latency offset of 20 felt super nice since it punishes players for attacking too fast while still making it so that every player on the server can be comboed regardless of how high their ping is. Knockback Sync is something that's already being implemented on a few smaller PvP servers at the time of me recording this video. With that being said, a few players have voiced their concerns with high-ping players being put at a disadvantage because of Knockback Sync. So to debunk any misconceptions, I reached out to the current high tier 1 in Sword PvP, Kylaz, to get her opinions on this matter. I'll be reading aloud what she sent me on Discord, and the footage you'll be watching is of her fighting a low tier 2 Sword player while having 220 MS on a server with Knockback Sync. This plugin is something I've been looking into and researching for about a year, and I've tested it on multiple ping ranges. I think from a gameplay perspective, an entertainment perspective, and a competitive perspective, this plugin is a must-need for this game. It makes Sword PvP and 1.21 PvP as a whole way more enjoyable and more noob-friendly. An issue in Sword PvP is that high ping players could come around and not learn crucial PvP methods that you'd need to learn on low ping, such as knockback control for example. This would make high ping PvP a lot more forgiving to learn than low ping PvP due to the knockback reduction. This plugin balances out the game and gives the game an even playing field for these players, since you can knock back them away, combo them, and use a bunch of techniques that you wouldn't be able to use otherwise against a high MS player. While I do believe that this plugin is a nerf to high ping on the lower level of PvP, I think this plugin also enables high ping PvPers to peak higher at a competitive level. Knockback Sync can help high ping PvPers reposition more easily as they can take advantage of not being pinned to the ground as much, which in many cases is like rolling a dice. It can go really well or it can go really badly. This is also helpful in other game modes like Diamond Pot, like when you're being crit chained for example. After testing Knockback Sync for a while now, I really can't see a single reason why any Minecraft server wouldn't use this. Not only does it make void-based game modes finally viable, but it also makes PvP feel a lot more intuitive for newer players, since they don't have to deal with players taking different knockback because of their latency. Everyone that I've gotten to test Knockback Sync really enjoys it, and I highly recommend trying it out for yourself on your own server or on MMC when it releases. Do keep in mind that this plugin is still in beta. With that being said though, it's being actively updated to improve performance and various bug fixes. But with this plugin, it's only a matter of time before competitive Minecraft PvP is pushed to the next level.